The sun burned white above Drybell Station, bleaching the paint from the sign and baking the iron rails until they hissed under boot. Flies circled the open mouths of cattle bones on the platform's edge, and heat shimmered off the dust like a warning. When the train doors clanged open, nobody stepped forward to meet her. Mary Lou stepped down in boots too new for this town. She wore a pale blue dress, wrinkled from days of travel, and held a hand-stitched satchel with shaking fingers. Her cheeks flushed with heat and hope. A letter sat folded in her palm, the ink faded but still legible. "I'll be waiting on the platform, Miss Whitlow. Yours, Eli Coatsworth." The train pulled away in a howl, trailing smoke and thunder, leaving behind nothing but silence and her shadow. A boy spat tobacco near her shoes and looked her up and down like she was livestock. She smiled politely. The boy ran off. She waited. 10 minutes. Then 20. A station hand leaned on a broom and cleared his throat like he'd seen this play before. "You lost or just thick?" he muttered. Not loud enough to count as kindness, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A few chuckled. Mary Lou stood taller. A rider came finally, a teenager on a mule, skin blistered and eyes squinting. He stopped a few feet away and pointed a dust-stained finger at her. "You, Mary Lou?" She nodded. He tossed a folded piece of paper onto her satchel and turned to leave. "Mr. Coatsworth says he changed his mind. Thought you'd be smaller." The hoofbeats faded before she could answer. She bent, picked up the note. The words were short, scrawled in haste. "A man's got the right to decide. Don't come looking." Behind her, someone laughed. "Guess the train don't run fat brides back east." A hot wind blew her bonnet into the tracks. She didn't chase it. Instead, she set her satchel down, sat atop it, and folded her hands in her lap. Her spine was straight. Her chin did not tremble. She looked forward, as if the man she expected might still come galloping over the rise. But he didn't. He was already there. The stranger watched from the shadow of the water tower, half his face lost under a wide-brimmed hat, coat draped like a tired flag around his shoulders. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. He chewed something bitter and spat into the dust. Then he walked over, bootsteps soft, calm, intentional. Mary Lou didn't look up until the boots stopped in front of her. "You're alone?" His voice was low, not soft, like gravel swept under a church pew. "I am," she said. "You came for a man who didn't want you?" She didn't flinch. "That's his mistake, not mine." A pause. "What's your name?" "Mary Lou Whitlow, and I ain't looking for pity." He crouched to meet her eyes. His face was scarred, clean-shaven except for the dark stubble that caught the sunlight. One eye was clouded, the other sharp enough to cut. "You married?" "No." "You still mean to be?" She studied him like she'd studied every line in Eli Coatsworth's letter. Careful, certain. "Not if I'm Charity. I'm not a churchman," he said, "and you don't look like Charity to me." He stood and offered his hand. Big knuckles, calloused palm. "My name's Elias Grimm. Folks call me Baron, but I don't care much for the sound of it. If you want a ride in a roof, you'll have it. If you want a name to carry, I'll sign it on paper right now, but I won't beg you." She looked at the platform, the stairs, the whispering crowd. Then at him. "All right," she said. "Let's get it done." They signed the ledger before sundown. The town clerk didn't bother hiding his surprise. The preacher forgot a line in the vows. Grimm said it didn't matter. Mary Lou didn't cry. That night they rode out together. Not close, not far. Silent, except for the creak of leather and the howl of prairie wind. Mary Lou's hands stayed, clenched in her lap as the wagon rolled into dusk. They arrived at the land well past midnight. The gate was crooked, the fence half-rotted. A house sat at the center, broad-shouldered, 2 floors, 1 window shattered. An upstairs beam hung like a snapped limb. No candlelight inside. He helped her down but didn't touch her. "This is yours?" she asked. It was hers, he replied. He walked up the porch steps like a man returning to a crime scene. Inside, the walls were scorched black in places. A burned photograph hung by a single nail, blurred faces, a woman with braids, a boy holding a toy horse. Mary Lou looked around. Dust hung in the air like ash. She opened a door and found a child's bedroom, untouched but sealed in silence. "I don't understand," she said. "Why bring me here? Why now?" Grim poured water from a rusted tin kettle. His hand trembled, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. "Because I need someone who doesn't scare easy." "That all I am to you? A hired heart with wide hips and no fear?" "You're more than they see," he said. "More than you think, and I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to finish something." "What?" He didn't answer. She went to bed in the back room. The sheets smelled like cedar and smoke. Through the thin walls she heard him pacing until dawn. In the morning, he was gone. She found him in the field, digging a post hole by hand. Shirt off, back lined with scars like river cuts. He didn't look up when she approached. "I ain't a burden," she said. "Didn't say you were. And I ain't a ghost." He wiped his brow. "Then don't act like one." She slapped him. Not hard, but loud enough for the birds to scatter. He turned slowly, jaw flexing. "You're angry," he said. "I'm awake." He stared at her for a long while, then nodded once. "Good." She turned and went back to the house. Later she found a wooden chest under the bed. Inside, a revolver, well-oiled, a wedding band tied to a ribbon, a ledger with 3 names crossed, out in red. The last one not crossed, Wade Banner. She closed the chest. Outside, Grim leaned against the porch post, watching the wind roll over the grass. Mary Lou stepped beside him. "What happened to your wife?" He didn't blink. She said no to the wrong man. He made sure no one ever said no again. "Is that who you're waiting for?" "I ain't waiting. I'm building the end of him." She looked out across the field, her voice low. "Then I'll help you hammer the nails." And for the first time since she stepped off that train, Elias Grimm smiled. Not wide, not soft, but real, like a crack in stone. The wind shifted, dust rose. The future moved. The house creaked when she stepped through the door, as if even the wood wasn't used to a woman walking its halls. Mary Lou's boots left square prints in the dust. Her skirt brushed against cobwebs that hadn't been disturbed in years. The parlor smelled like smoke and time. She didn't ask who used to sit in the scorched rocking chair, and he didn't offer. Grim sat at the kitchen table with a knife and a red apple, peeling slow, the coil falling into a curled ribbon. He didn't look up as she cleaned. She didn't ask permission. A day passed, then 2. She fixed the shutters, patched the chimney, swept the porch until it gleamed pale again under the sunset. He watched in silence, sometimes from the barn door, sometimes from the ridge, sometimes from right behind her, saying nothing, but always watching. On the 3rd night, as she patched a hole above the hearth, she turned to find him holding a lantern in one hand, a small box in the other. He didn't say a word as he handed it to her. Inside was a key. Brass, cold, polished. She looked up at him. "You're not a man of many words," she said. "I've said too many already." She waited. He sat down slow on the edge of the table. The lantern flickered across his face, bringing out the hollows under his cheekbones. "Place ain't much," he muttered. "But it was hers. My wife. Elin." Mary Lou stood still. "She made this house with her hands. I was never much good at shaping things, better at ending them." "You were a soldier." "No." "What then?" He peeled off his glove. 3 fingers were missing from his left hand, scarred to the wrist. I collected bad men for coin. Sometimes good ones, if the bounty was worth it. She sat down across from him. There's a town 2 counties east, he said. Carrion Ridge. I rode in once years back chasing a preacher who turned outlaw. He'd robbed a train, murdered 6 men and a marshal. Word was he'd holed up in a chapel. I came in with my guns drawn, kicked the door open and pulled the trigger. He paused. The man didn't move, but the boy beside him did, ran between us. I didn't see him until it was done. Mary Lou looked away. That was the last job I took, sold my irons, swore off the hunt, came back here to fix what was left, but it was too late. You mean Elin? He nodded. Wade Banner made a deal with the railroad, Grim said. He wanted to lay track through this land. I told him no. Elin backed me. He smiled, rode off like a gentleman. That night the house caught fire. I was out hunting. Came back to smoke. The baby. He didn't even cry loud enough to wake the neighbors. Mary Lou blinked hard. You think Banner said it? I know he did, and he knows I know. Thing is, you can't take revenge against a man like that unless you're ready to lose everything, and I'd already lost most of it. She ran her fingers across the key. What do you need me for? You're not afraid of being seen, he said. You don't fold easy. You came here after being humiliated, spat on, abandoned, and you still stood straight. She laughed once, short and sharp. You married me to fight Wade Banner? I married you because I was tired of ghosts and needed something that breathed. Silence settled between them, heavy but not cruel. That night, she didn't sleep in the back room. She slept in the front chair, shotgun on her lap, facing the door. By morning, the town knew. The general store clerk wouldn't meet her eyes. The blacksmith's wife whispered into her teacup. Even. The children stared longer than they should. Word had traveled like prairie fire. The fat bride left behind had been claimed by a killer with a title and a ruined house. Sheriff Cale Verne rode out that afternoon, hat low and boots loud on the porch. Grim met him with arms crossed. You married her? Grim didn't blink. That's not your concern. She's a civilian. She's a woman, which means she's already stronger than most men in Dry Bell. The sheriff chewed that over. You think Wade's forgotten you? I'm counting on the opposite. You draw blood. This town pays for it. Grim stepped closer. Then, maybe it's time it paid. Mary Lou watched from inside, silent. After the sheriff left, she followed Grim to the barn. You need help? She asked. I need someone who won't run. Good thing I'm too fat to run fast. He froze, then smiled, faint and crooked. Reckon that's a blessing. Over the next few days, she practiced with a rifle. Grim showed her the grip, the breath, the silence between heartbeats where the world held still. Her hands were steady. He never complimented her, but he loaded her bullets with care. One morning she found him in the field, sharpening a spade. No one buried anything. No one said anything about the shallow trench by the fence. She didn't ask. At night, he read from a torn book by the fire. She cooked simple meals, thick and heavy. They sat across from each other, not lovers, not strangers. Something else, something not yet named. Then the telegram came, hand-delivered by a pale boy in suspenders. Banner rail engine arriving Friday. 5 cars, personal staff, armed escort. Grim folded the paper without expression. Mary Lou folded the linens, laid out the weapons, and polished the brass knocker on the front door. She didn't ask what they'd do. That night she walked outside, stared up at the stars and whispered, God, don't let me die stupid. Grim stood behind her. You think I'll let you die? I think dying's easy. Living past it's the trick. He nodded. That's what Elin used to say. She turned to him. You see her in me? No, I see what she would have liked. For a moment they said nothing. Then he handed her a pocket watch. Inside, a sketch of a boy with wide eyes and a missing tooth. She closed it gently. "You ever planned to kill him before I came?" she asked. "I plan to die trying. That ain't much of a plan. You still planning to die?" He looked at her like the wind was asking questions. "No," he said. "Now I'm planning to win." The sound of a hammer echoed across the dry field as Mary Lou drove a nail through the splintered edge of the barn wall. Her hands were blistered, her sleeves damp with sweat. She didn't ask for help, didn't want it. What she wanted was for the place to stop looking like it had already buried its dead. Inside, Grim dragged a chest across the floorboards. The scrape of wood over wood filled the silence. He set it down between them without a word. When he opened it, Mary Lou saw rows of iron laid across velvet, guns, knives, boxes of bullets, and beneath them, something stranger. A black scarf with blood crusted at one end, a worn photograph with a hole through it, and a folded piece of parchment that made her stomach tighten. The name written at the top, Wade Banner. Grim held the parchment like it weighed more than it should. "He's coming with the train, not for me, for the land. He'll bring papers, smiles, and enough guns to erase whatever says no." Mary Lou took the paper from his hand. She read each word slowly. Wade Banner had purchased nearly every property along the tracks except one, Grim's. The map on the back marked Grim's home in red ink. "Obstruction," it read. She looked up at Grim. "So we're not fighting a man. We're fighting something bigger." He nodded once. The sun dropped behind the ridge and left, the house cloaked in orange shadow. Mary Lou finished repairing the door, then climbed the stairs to the old nursery. She stood beside the tiny bed, untouched since the fire. Dust still covered the toy horse. She didn't cry. She wrapped the horse in a cloth, brought it downstairs, and placed it on the mantel. Grim saw it but didn't speak. His silence wasn't cold. It was filled with things too old and sharp to name. A week passed like smoke. Quiet, stinging, and hard to hold. Mary Lou walked into town with a list and left with nothing. The grocer turned his back. The blacksmith's wife offered a look instead of sugar. At the post office, she overheard two women whisper behind her, "She ain't a bride. She's bait." She turned and looked at them like she was measuring caskets. They shut up. That night, she scrubbed her hands raw at the kitchen basin. Grim sat at the table oiling a revolver. "You knew they'd turn on us," she said. "They already had. Why marry me? Why not some bounty hunter, some fighter?" He set the revolver down. "Because they wouldn't have stayed. They don't know how to survive shame." She let that settle, then leaned on the counter. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "When the train comes, Wade'll hold court in Drybell. Flash money, offer the mayor a new jail and the preacher a new church. But what he wants is the land. He'll send men out to inspect it. And they'll come with rifles." She nodded. "So what's the plan?" He poured coffee and handed her a cup. "We don't wait. We walk into town before they settle. Shake the cage first." "You want to provoke a man who owns half the county?" "I want him off balance." Mary Lou took a long sip. "Then I'll need a new dress." Grim's eyes flicked up. "You sure?" "I'm not the one who should be scared." She sewed through the night, using fabric she found in the trunk under the stairs. Old curtains, a shawl with burn marks, and a scrap of blue from the dress she wore when she first arrived. It wasn't pretty, but it fit. When she stood in the mirror, she didn't see a jilted bride or a desperate woman. She saw someone sharpened by rejection. The next morning, she rode beside Grim into Drybell. The townsfolk stared, not hiding it this time. A group of men leaned against the saloon post, laughing until Grim stopped the horse right in front of them. One of them, lean with a rat's eyes, spat at the dirt. "Didn't know the Baron was playing house with a side of beef." Grim didn't blink. You speak like that again and I'll bury your teeth where you stand. The man's smile cracked, but his mouth stayed shut. They went straight to the mayor's office. The secretary tried to stop them. Grimm pushed the door open. Mayor Dalton looked up from his desk, flustered. Baron, Miss, you're selling this town, Mary Lou said, voice like coiled wire. You're letting Wade Banner buy your spine. Dalton blinked. Now wait. Don't bother, Grimm said. We know the train's coming. We know he plans to take our land. We came to tell you he won't. Dalton stood. You're threatening the law. There's no law if it can be bought, Mary Lou said. The mayor swallowed hard. Banner has rights, deeds, authority. Grimm turned. Then tell him to bring a preacher and a coffin. They left the office in silence. Outside, the wind had picked up. Dust curled at their feet like ghosts hungry for something to bury. That night, they fortified the house. Windows braced, rifles loaded. Mary Lou practiced in the yard until her shoulder bruised. She never missed twice. Grimm marked points on a map. The well, the barn, the ridge. They'd have no help, no backup. The sheriff had made himself clear. If shots were fired, he'd wait for the smoke to settle before walking in. Mary Lou studied the map. You ever think this is suicide? I used to hope it was, he said. Now I think maybe it's justice. Maybe? He met her eyes. I've lived too long to pretend I'm the hero. She didn't argue. The next morning, a rider came with a flag of truce. Banner's man, dressed in silk and sweat. He handed over a sealed envelope. Grimm opened it. A check inside. 6 digits. No note. Mary Lou took the check, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it into the flames. Grimm watched it curl and blacken. You know what that was? A test, she said. He smiled. And you passed. The rider didn't return. The train would come soon, and with it, the reckoning. The barn door slammed open before sunrise. Grimm stood in the dark, breathing like a bull before a charge. In his hand, a telegram crumpled and wet with sweat. Mary Lou sat on the porch steps with her boots unlaced and a shotgun across her lap. She didn't flinch. Friday, he said. Banner's arriving Friday, whole damn train car to himself. 3 lawyers, 2 marshals on his payroll, 6 guards and a town hall meeting at high noon. Mary Lou tied her laces slow. That gives us 4 days. Grimm dropped the telegram beside her. He's holding the meeting in the Drybell church, wants to show he's God's chosen robber. She looked up at him. You gonna stop him? I can't stop that many with just a name and a graveyard smile. You're not alone, he grunted. Not agreement, not denial. They spent the next 2 days turning the house into a message. Grimm painted a sign and staked it at the edge of the road. Private land. Trespass and bleed. Mary Lou reinforced the windows with scrap iron and laid nails across the road like a bed of thorns. She wrapped rope around the fence posts and tied bells to the barn door, a warning system, a funeral chime waiting for the right breeze. They didn't sleep much. She cleaned every weapon until the metal gleamed. He dug trenches under the windows. The past 2 weeks had taught them something dangerous: how to move like a pair. When the 3rd day dawned, the sheriff came riding. Cale Verne wasn't a coward, but he wore a tired look like it was stitched into his badge. He dismounted slow, one hand resting near the butt of his revolver, not out of threat, just habit. Baron, he said. Miss. Mary Lou didn't smile. She stood with a shovel in her hand, halfway through a ditch. You building graves or planting potatoes? Verne asked. Grimm wiped his brow with a rag. Don't need both? The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the trench. Banner's men are riding in early. Word is they're coming to inspect, not negotiate. I came to say, I won't be out here when it happens. I got orders to stay put in town. Mary Lou threw another shovelful of dirt. Then don't pretend you're here to help. Vern took off his hat. I ain't proud of it. I just know what happens when men like Banner want something bad. Drybell ain't big enough to fight back, not unless someone else throws the first shot. We plan to, Grim said. That what you wanted to hear? No. Vern looked at Mary Lou. I came to ask if you'll survive it. She stared straight through him. That's never been the question. He left without another word. That night. The wind carried more than silence. Horses, faint in the distance. Grim counted them by hoofbeat. 4. Maybe 5. He checked his rifle, then nodded to Mary Lou. She took the back door. A lantern glowed on the edge of the property. Men in dusters stood by the fence laughing. One of them rode forward and stopped under the sign. Grim stepped out with the rifle slung across his shoulder. Evening, the rider said. His accent wasn't local, clean, paid for. Name's Burke. I represent Mr. Banner. You're trespassing. Burke smiled. Not yet. Still outside the line. You speak your piece or you ride. I'm here to offer terms. Banner's willing to double his price. Cash in hand. No hard feelings. Your wife can keep the house if she likes. Grim's knuckles whitened on the stock. She's not for sale. Neither's the land. Burke's smile didn't fade. This is the last offer. After this, it's progress by other means. You bring guns. I bring paperwork, but Banner brings men who can sign it in blood if they need to. Mary Lou stepped out of the shadows with her shotgun level. You best ride before we forget to bury you. Burke tipped his hat. Didn't know the lady could speak. She does more than speak, Grim said. She reloads faster than you blink. The men retreated without drawing steel, but the warning was clear. Next time wouldn't be talk. Grim and Mary Lou stood in the yard until the hoofbeats vanished. He turned to her. They're gonna burn this place down. I know. You ready to lose everything? I already did, she said. This is me fighting to keep what's mine. He nodded once, slow. I buried my wife with that kind of fire. You remind me of her. I'm not her. I know. You stand straighter. In the morning, the bells rang. They weren't expecting company so early. Grim spotted the dust trail first. 6 riders. No flags, no pretense, just muscle in clean. Suits with polished saddles. Mary Lou took position behind the chicken coop. Grim stood at the well with the long rifle. The men rode to the fence and dismounted in a line. Their leader, slick hair, white gloves, city eyes, stepped forward and read from a scroll like a sermon. By authority of the New Frontier Development Act and order of Wade Banner Enterprises, this land is subject to inspection for compliance and acquisition. Grim raised the rifle. The man didn't flinch. You raise that, you declare war. I'm just reminding you I'm ready. One of the riders kicked at the sign. Another spat on the ground. Mary Lou stepped out, shotgun drawn, and leveled it at the leader's kneecap. You got 30 seconds. The man stared, then said, You don't scare us. She didn't smile. I ain't trying to. I'm aiming. The group hesitated. Something about her tone made them back down. They rode off again, but slower this time, looking back like they'd seen something they didn't understand. Something that didn't fit the plan. Grim waited until they were gone, then lowered the rifle. He turned to her. They're rattled. They'll come back louder. That's what I want. That night, they sat on the porch and listened to the insects buzz and the coyotes howl. The house behind them glowed warm, but every window had a gun behind it. Mary Lou reached for his hand and found it already reaching for hers. He squeezed once. No words, none needed. The train whistle sounded the next dawn, long, low, and heavy, a sound that carried promises and threats. Grim stood at the edge of the field, watching the horizon darken with coal smoke. Mary Lou loaded the last shell and said, "We meet the devil today." Grim nodded. "Let's make sure he remembers our names." The train screamed into Drybell like a bullet with a sermon behind it. Not a soul spoke on the platform, no cheers, no handshakes, just the hiss of steam and the groan of iron settling into dirt. It wasn't a welcome, it was a warning. Wade Banner stepped down in boots too polished for real dust. His coat hung stiff, his smile hung looser. Behind him came the entourage, lawyers in ivory vests, men with rifles under dusters, a preacher who never blinked. Drybell's mayor stood waiting with sweat behind his ears and a pen already in hand. Inside the church, the pews filled fast. Every merchant, rancher, and fence-straddling coward in town crammed in for the show. Banner stood at the pulpit like it belonged to him, arms outstretched as he offered promises dressed like prayers. A new school, a grain line, a rail spur that'd make the town a hub for the future. His voice was honeyed rot. Grim and Mary Lou watched from the back. "You see it?" she whispered. "Yeah. The men by the door weren't here to guard. They were here to trap." She scanned the windows, 2 marksmen on the roof across the street, 3 more by the wagon depot. Grim tapped his finger twice on the rifle sling. She nodded. Message received. Banner's eyes caught them and his smile deepened. "Evening, Baron Grim. Brought the missus too, I see. Brave woman. I admire that." Mary Lou's grip on her. Skirt tightened, but she said nothing. "Before we continue," Banner went on, "I'd like to settle an old matter." He gestured to a man in the front pew. A notary stepped forward with a thick folder. "I'm offering Baron Grim full payment again, triple what I offered last year. In cash, witnessed, no strings." Grim stepped forward. "The answer's still no." Banner chuckled like a stage actor playing humble. "You're holding up progress." "I'm stopping a flood." The preacher shifted uneasily. Banner's voice lost its warmth. "You're just one man." Grim glanced at Mary Lou. "I'm not alone." "Fair enough," Banner said. "But I don't need to fight. I'll wait. You'll break. Everyone does." Mary Lou finally spoke. "You ever bury a child, Mr. Banner?" The room went still. "No," she said, stepping forward. "Then don't talk to me about what breaks a person." Banner's smile fractured. The meeting ended with applause from men who owed more than they'd ever admit. But not from the town. The silence afterward was louder than any sermon. Banner left the church with fire behind his eyes and instructions whispered to his men. Back at the homestead, Mary Lou moved with a purpose. She scattered broken glass beneath the window ledges. Grim loaded buckshot into a rusted scattergun and checked the fence line twice. No one slept. At midnight, the bell on the barn door rang. Mary Lou shot upright, grabbed her rifle, and took position at the window. Grim rolled from the cot and hit the dirt without a sound. Through the glass, they saw 4 shapes moving across the ridge, too smooth for coyotes, too clumsy for scouts. Grim didn't speak. He just pointed. They waited. The first man reached the porch and stepped on the boards with a creak. Mary Lou didn't hesitate. Her rifle cracked once. The man dropped without a sound. The others scattered, but they hadn't planned for shadows to shoot back. Grim moved like a ghost through the side door, his revolver barking once, twice. A third figure went down behind the woodpile. One made it to the barn. Mary Lou bolted out barefoot and furious. She caught him behind the water trough, rifle raised. The man turned with a knife swinging high. She ducked under and slammed the butt of her gun into his chin. He hit the ground gasping. She pressed the barrel to his neck. "Name." He gurgled blood. She cocked the hammer. "Name." "Cole. Cole Granger. Who sent you?" "Banner said just scare you, burn the fence. Swear to God, you brought a knife for a fence?" He didn't answer. She stepped back and nodded to Grim. "He's yours." Grim didn't hesitate. One shot. Clean. Mary Lou wiped her face with her sleeve. "How many more, you think?" "Enough." They buried the bodies in silence, but not out of mercy. The grave markers read, "Trespassers." Nothing more. By morning the house smelled like gunpowder and dirt. The front step was stained. Grim sat sharpening a Bowie knife that had belonged to his father. Mary Lou cooked coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. "They'll come again," she said. "They'll come louder." He looked at her, eyes hollow but steady. "I used to think revenge was fire, something that roared, but now I know. It's patience. It's staying on your feet longer than the bastard swinging at you." She sat beside him. "It's also a good aim." He cracked a grin. "You got that part figured." A knock at the door. Not hurried, not scared. Sheriff Vern stepped in without waiting to be invited. "I heard the shots," he said. "You hear the reason?" Grim asked. "Same as always. Banner don't like hearing no." Mary Lou poured him coffee. He accepted without thanks. "I got one deputy," Vern said, "and he's not worth the bullet to wake him. Town's scared. Folks are selling, packing, fleeing." "They always run?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Only the ones who've never been punched hard enough." "What do you want, Sheriff?" Grim asked. "I want to know if you'll survive the next hit. If not, I need to know where to dig." Mary Lou answered for him. "We're not dying." "Easy." The sheriff drained his cup, set it down, and tipped his hat. "Then I'll stay close to my radio. If the dust rises, I'll come see what's left." He left without another word. Grim leaned back in his chair. "We're alone," he said. "We always were." "No." He shook his head. "We're something else now. We're the reason they're scared." Outside, thunder cracked. No storm in sight. Just a train whistle splitting the air like a war cry. Mary Lou stood, rifle in hand. "Then let's give them something worth fearing." The sky turned black before noon, and not from clouds. Smoke rose from the depot where Wade Banner's men set fire to the grain silos. No warning, no demands. Just fire. They watched it burn from the ridge, laughing like it was sport. Farmers ran with wet cloths over their faces. Horses screamed from their stalls. The mayor hid in his office. No one pointed a finger. No one knocked on Banner's door. It was Drybell's way of saying yes, without using words. Grim strapped on, his coat slow, like every movement cost him. Mary Lou stood in front of the mirror, wiping soot from her face with a torn rag. She didn't ask if it was time. She already knew. By sundown, the whole town knew where the fight would land. The church bell rang, not for prayer, for reckoning. Banner's men rode in with polished saddles and vests buttoned all the way up. The rifles they carried were clean, like they'd never been used. They moved like wolves with law badges, sure no one would bite back. But someone did. Grim and Mary Lou walked down the center of Main Street with weapons visible, boots crunching over scorched gravel. No crowd, no friends, no backup. Just two figures walking into a storm they built themselves. Banner waited outside the saloon, one foot on the hitch rail, hands gloved and relaxed. His men flanked him, 6 on each side. Across the way, the sheriff stood on the boardwalk with his arms folded and his mouth shut. "Thought you'd run by now," Banner said. Grim didn't slow. "That what you do?" "I don't run. I replace." "You're an old fence post, Baron. You rot in place while the world moves forward." Mary Lou stopped beside Grim. "Then come break us." Banner glanced at his men. One nodded. The first shot came from a rooftop. Missed by an inch. Mary Lou spun and fired before it echoed. The shooter collapsed through the roof tiles, then the street exploded. Bullets tore through the still air. Windows shattered. Horses screamed and bolted. Grim dove behind a wagon, dragging. Mary Lou down with him, dust flew like ash. "Left side," she shouted. He rose, fired 2 rounds. A man near the post office dropped, clutching his neck. More came. Banner's enforcers moved fast, fanning out, trying to circle, but Grim had trained for worse than this. He wasn't shooting to wound. He shot to stop. Mary Lou kept low, her aim ruthless, efficient. 2 through the ribs, 1 through the mouth. It didn't feel like a gunfight. It felt like a ritual. The saloon burst open, Banner inside, barking orders, but he wasn't used to people shooting back without fear. His smile was gone. A bullet grazed Grim's shoulder. He grunted, bit down, and kept moving. Mary Lou ripped cloth from her dress and tied it off without breaking pace. When the smoke cleared, the street looked like a battlefield. Blood soaked the dust. 3 of Banner's men groaned in the dirt. The others ran, none toward him. Banner stood alone, revolver drawn, lips tight. "You think this makes you a hero?" he shouted. "No," Grim said. "It makes me done." He stepped forward, slow and steady. Mary Lou walked with him side by side. Banner raised his gun. Mary Lou fired first. It wasn't dramatic. No spinning, no last words. Just a hole between his eyes, and then the sound of something heavy falling. The silence after was thick, like the town itself was holding its breath. Sheriff Vern finally stepped off the boardwalk. He walked over, looked down at Banner's body, then at them. "No jury in this county would convict you," he said. Grim nodded. "Wasn't asking for one." Vern looked at Mary Lou. "You all right?" She wiped the blood from her hands on the side of her skirt. "I will be." They buried Banner at the edge of town, face down. Grim didn't say a word over the grave. Mary Lou tossed in the broken pen he'd offered her to sign the deed. The next morning, the mayor called an emergency meeting. No one showed. 3 days passed before the first train left Drybell again. Banner's company pulled their investments. The railroad went silent. Grim and Mary Lou returned to the homestead. She hung new curtains. He patched the holes in the siding. The toy horse went back on the mantel. They didn't talk about what came next. They just did it. One evening, a letter came. No seal, just a single name in red ink. Levi Banner. Mary Lou handed it to Grim. He didn't open it. Just looked out across the fields and nodded once. "They keep coming. They always will." She leaned against the doorframe. "Then we keep building." He smiled, faint and slow. "Together?" She looked him straight in the eye. "You married me on a train platform with no reason. I reckon we've earned one now." Behind them, the house stood tall, no longer a ruin, no longer a grave, not peace, but something close enough to try for.